Hello, and welcome to my presentation on advocacy for funding. Merriam-Webster defines advocacy as the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal, and then to support or argue for that cause or proposal. When it comes specifically to libraries, the ALA says that advocacy work helps to show the importance of the work the libraries do, both in and for their communities, and then in turn, advocates take action to help support the library and speak out on their behalf, which is going to be really important when we talk about funding. So, who can be an advocate? Well, really anyone. Library board members, friends or foundation members, library users, and library users is potentially is probably your largest untapped potential because they're already using the library, but many of them aren't actively speaking out on behalf of the library when it comes to budget times or fundraising or things like that. But we'll talk more about that later. Community members and leaders, library staff, are also great advocates because they know the library better than anyone else and more. So basically, anyone who's willing to speak out on behalf of the library or take actions that help to spread the library's mission and values in the community are being advocates. So how does this work when you're talking about specifically for budgeting and fundraising? Well, actually advocating for fundraising and budgets help to support each other. People who donate to your library do it because they believe in your mission and vision and they want you to be able to continue your work. So, it's about turning those individuals who already support your mission and your vision into people who not just believe in the mission, but as Wood says, but who will vote for your levies and who will advocate for your system with elected officials. And when it comes to your budget, advocacy means the active involvement of citizens serving as lobbyists to communicate to elected officials the need for strong public funding for libraries. So basically, you're advocating to your community about the need for your library, and in turn, the community is advocating on your behalf when it comes to budget season. So why is this important? Well, for many reasons besides the 4 that I put here, but one aspect is just the practicality. Budgets are getting tighter, and there's greater need to defend the money that you're getting. And this often means going to budget hearings, talking to elected officials outside of budget meetings, getting people in your community to be willing to speak out, media coverage potentially, a lot of different things. Aspect 2 is to make advocacy effective, you need to be an active member of your community and understand why they support you. So, advocacy measures, by definition, put you into the community. You need to connect to people. Even if it's just sending an email, you are connecting with that person on some level. But, when you're connecting one-on-one, it's obviously a much more tangible effort. Aspect 3 is really about the fundraising side of advocacy. And that's that as much as we would like to provide everything for free, it's often not possible without fundraising assistance. So, for example, many libraries use it to support programming or when they're doing a capital campaign when it comes to renovations and things like that. And this is where that advocacy comes in. And it's actually a really great opportunity to say things like, you know how you love this author talk series that we're running? Well, it's actually funded by people like you. And you can kind of think about it in regards to the NPR or PBS messaging, because it's a very similar idea. You're getting these services for free, but you support the work and the mission and the things that are possible. So you want to help that continue by funding. So I hope you can start to see how this is a sort of self-feeding cycle. Hopefully, if you're doing it well. Aspect 4 is an increased competition for philanthropic dollars, which means you'll need to be able to make a compelling argument for support. And that compelling argument support should probably be your advocacy message, which is why in the learning activity that we'll have later, you're going to create an elevator pitch. Because every librarian supports the library. Every library staff member wouldn't be there if they didn't support the library. But can you turn that into actual messaging? When you're talking to somebody, can you explain to them that importance and that ability to explain the importance and the value of the library? That's your advocacy message. So let's take a quick look at sources of library funding. The vast majority of library funding still comes from local municipal funding. So, this is your city government, things like that. And that's why, budget funding and budget advocacy and things like that are so important, because that's where the majority of your money is going to be coming from. And so advocacy, in most cases, libraries need to search for ways to fund their operations in the short and long term. This is both with fundraising and their budgets. If you're looking at your budget and seeing that each year your operational expenditures are being cut, what is your plan for either increasing funding from the municipal government, or what is your plan for increasing funding? And how does advocacy, in turn, help you to achieve that goal? For larger building projects, libraries often have to do capital campaigns in addition to the funds they might receive from the city governments. So city governments might partially support your renovation of the children's room, but you might have to do additional funding outside of that. And this can come from grants, major donors, individual gifts, donations from companies or organizations, fundraising events, and more. And that's in that 9.2% under the other category. State could also just be state funds. Sometimes there are state grants, federal grants, things like that. But your two largest sources of funding are going to be from local governance and that other category, which often falls under sort of the generalized fundraising heads. I am including grant writing in that fundraising topic as well. Maybe I should be specific about that. So, like most things, starting with a plan is going to be of great assistance to you. Lokshin said, creating a fundraising plan for your library will help you get organized, get strategic, and take consistent action. By creating goals, you can see actionable items that you need to take to achieve those things. And they should be probably SMART goals. So how long are you going to want to take to achieve those goals? They should be short-term and long-term. So what do you need this fiscal year versus what are you going to need in 5 years? And then who should you involve in this process? So are you going to get board members to go out and advocate on your behalf? Are you going to get staff members involved? Are you going to work with community partners? Are you going to try to cultivate major donors? Whatever it is, you have a lot of different people at your disposal. and it's kind of figuring out what is the best way to get different people involved. So assessing your current strengths and weaknesses. Do you have a really great friends group? Do you have a really supportive director? Whatever it is. And then what areas are you not as weak at? Do you need to improve your online image and messaging? Do you need better strategic partners? Whatever it is, you can kind of use that to determine what your current needs are that are not being met. And this could be small things, like you need more money in certain areas of your collection budget, but it also could mean, like you need more money for facilities, or you need more staffing in your children's room. Whatever it is, after you have determined what your needs are, you should set your funding priorities, because you really don't want to be at risk of competing funding priorities. So, for example, when you go to budget season and your director is saying the most important thing to us right now is getting a new staff member in your children's room, but then your board president comes to the next budget hearing and saying that our collections budget needs funding desperately. Those disparate messages could potentially hurt your overall funding ability. Or, if you're running a capital campaign, but your annual appeal letter mentions nothing about it and said, we're trying to fund for hotspots. You can kind of see where you need to set goals, you need to have priorities, and then actionable items. So, I have a whole slide on developing relationships, because at its root, advocacy work is about relationships. It's about building relationships, whether it's with patrons, whether it's prospective donors, whether it's with organizational leaders, whether it's with city council people, whoever it is, you are building a relationship of trust with that person. You're developing and cultivating that relationship in a way that they better see your mission and your vision. But beyond that, here are some ways that you can help do that. 1, physically be in your community. Go to your partner's fundraising events. Go to art openings. Go to theater shows. Go to budget hearings. Go to, whatever it is, neighborhood association meetings. But physically be there. Physically be visible in your community and be talking about your work. Because to start with, that advocacy work has to come from you if you want other people to have that same enthusiasm for spreading the library, mission and why it's important to support the library financially. In this case, utilize your board. As I mentioned before, your board members often come with great connections and are often the reason why they're chosen is because they have great connections in the community. Can they make a first introduction to a potential major donor? Can they speak on your behalf at a budget hearing and actually have sway? Whatever it is, brainstorm with your board. They should be really enthusiastic. They should be the people who believe in your mission and your vision and are often the best and loudest advocates for your organization. Diversify your network. And this is essentially talking about not going to the same well over and over again. When you're asking for funding specifically, this is going to be a little bit different when it comes to budget time, because, you're asking the same people. But maybe it's changing who is asking, or changing, how you're asking, or whatever it is. But certainly when it comes to advocating for your fundraising, going to the same people every single time, you will have year over donors. But it's important to expand your networks as well and make it personal. The vast majority of people they found, over 60% of people, do you support the library? Do you support the mission? But oftentimes it's figuring out how to turn that personal, warm, fuzzy feeling for the library into the actionable item that we were talking about earlier. Whether it's donating to your organization, or whether it's advocating for funds, whether it is speaking to a city council member or the mayor on your behalf, whatever it is, it should be something for them. And this is kind of the NPR message too, that you're providing services for free. So how do you turn something that a person is getting for free into realizing, well, it's not actually free, but their support and their advocacy helps to make all of this possible? I hope that makes sense. And, this can be a little bit overwhelming, especially when you first start, because there are so many different possibilities for starting that advocacy message, and there's so many different channels for funding for your library, which is amazing and great because it often, it provides such a diversity. But at the same time, I would advise you to look back at those goals. Are they, even if they're small goals, what are your goals? How are you going to achieve them? And then decide the methods for achieving them, right off. So I think that I would encourage you to try new things. These numbers are specifically about fundraising, but you can see that patrons give the vast majority, individual patrons in fact, gave the majority of funding to libraries. And I think this is what I was talking about that untapped potential of your patrons being incredible supporters and active and loud supporters when it comes to funding. And also, on the other side, a amazing potential wealth of donation money, which is what this is about. It's about advocating for funding. So try different things, try an appeal letter, try a social media campaign, whatever it is, try it and see if it works. And maybe it doesn't work as well as you hoped, and you can learn from that and adjust it. But building those relationships, putting yourself out there, that's going to be essential. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I know this is kind of long, but there's so much to learn when it comes to advocacy and fundraising. But that's the wonderful part, is that there's so many opportunities, and it's just choosing where you want to start to learn. So feel free to post any questions on this thread, or send me an email, or anything like that. I might not have it all, but I think the joy of librarians is that if I don't know, hopefully I know how to find it. Okay,